we are back live with another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and we have an individual on this evening who competed in the WWF and wrestled some big names, has some great road stories to tell, and is a personal friend of Mario Mancini, the draw on this channel, Cheap Heat Productions. But before we get to all of that, I have to throw, of course, to the man whose channel this is, Mr. Cheap Heat himself, Morris Shortall. Morris, how are you, sir?
Thank you very much, Jack. Second show of the evening. If anyone wants to click back to the last video, we just had Big Dick Johnson on the show there, and he told some great stories from working in creative in WWE and from working as an on-screen performer, and a memorable one at that as well. And today's guest, Mr. Robbie Parliment, worked in the WWF, close friend of Mr. Mario Mancini, comes highly recommended. So we're delighted to have you on the show today, Robbie. Thanks a million.
Yeah, thank you, Morris. I'm really happy to follow Big Dick. So it's a highlight.
Kind of like jerking the curtain, I guess, in some respects. But
Absolutely.
Robbie, I wanted to ask you, growing up, were you a fan of professional wrestling? And if so, what territories or companies did you follow?
Growing up, it was always Channel 9, WOR, WWF. It was, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock on a Saturday. And that was the last, this is years ago. So it was always, that one show, and that was it. I think we used to watch, and I'm fairly certain this is true, but I used to go to Channel 47 on, which is like UHF at that time. And we would listen to the Luchadors. We would watch the Luchadors and see some Spanish programming that way. But generally, 100% it was WWF.
What was there a particular moment or somehow that dawned upon you that you wanted to try wrestling yourself? And if so, could you walk us through following that your process, training, and getting ready for the ring?
Absolutely. So I had not watched wrestling for some time when I was working in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was working in Brooklyn, New York, and a friend suggested that we go to a match. And at the match, I ran into someone that I went to school with in high school, and got to, and he brought me backstage. I ran into these people that I couldn't believe I was meeting, with S.D. Jones, Magnificent Moolah, and I think even maybe Dominic DeNucci. I don't know if you know these people, but Dominic DeNucci and a bunch of others. And it was like a dream, right? It was like the best thing ever. So they said, hey, you're a big guy. And I was playing football at the time. I was playing in a league in Brooklyn, and I've always been, the sort of a big guy. And they said, "Why don't you come in?" And so I went in, and I never dreamed of being a wrestler. Never, it was never like on my list of things that I ever thought I would do. But once they mentioned it, it was like a click, and I said, "You know what? This is something I'd really like to do and give it a shot." And initially I was like, oof, I don't know if I want to really kind of, do that to my body. But I said, I'll give it a shot. So I went down to a place, Allentown in Pennsylvania, and where they were doing tapings for Channel 9. And there it was. I was only 19 at the time, but I was big. I was like 6'5", 6'6", 350. So went down there and met with a bunch of people in Allentown. including Tony Altamore, who, as you have heard from Mario, that was our trainer. And at the time, there was no school. It was, the dark ages. There was no school. There were other schools, I think, but generally the way you learned was by going to the ring early, like on a Friday or Saturday. And remember, this is a time when they had like tons of these little shows. Every night was another show, another area. You see it in, the biographies of the wrestlers at the time. You could work 7 days a week, and really be away from home 7 days a week. So I went to Allentown and I met Tony Altamore, and he got me set up going to these rings early, and essentially getting my butt kicked. My first one was with Mr. Fuji, which, by the way, was like amazing. I thought it was just absolutely, so. So just stepping back for a moment, Tony said that he would train me, and he got me with Mr. Fuji, the Rock's dad, Rocky Johnson, Salvatore Bellomo, and at the time, there was a guy named Kurt Hennig. Kurt Hennig was making his way in, and he was learning at, it's like after I had done it for a bunch of times, I was with Mr. Fuji my first day, and I literally thought I was going to die because he had me running stairs. He had me doing these crazy, squats that, and I was a big guy, but I was not in great shape. And I literally could not get out of bed for 3 days afterwards. Almost literally, my legs would not work. Every time I bent my leg, it just went down. So I went with the first time I went with Fuji, and I was with Fuji a bunch of different times. Then I went with I met Rocky Johnson. I met all these different people, but Fuji was my main guy. He would train me every time. So Kurt Hennig was learning how to do shooting drop kicks, and I was learning how to take a bump from shooting drop kicks. And hit me with his boot right in my throat, and I couldn't talk forever. And it was just all these different, awesome things happened with these people I had watched on TV. And it was, that went on for some time. I'd meet up with these people. Generally, Fuji was the one I saw the most. And then ultimately, Tony started the school called Passarella's Quest in Orange, Connecticut. And it was a more regular thing, and I think everything came on really quickly at that point.
I have to ask, since you mentioned Mr. Fuji, were you ever a victim of one of his infamous ribs?
You know what? It was more like a solid, continual line of ribs. He was like, sort of going into a restaurant with, $5 in my pocket, and then kind of him leaving was one of the big ones. But honestly, the big thing I remember about Fuji was he was when we first started, there really was almost no one who was saying that wrestling was not real. No one said that it was entertainment, sports entertainment like they do today. And, when I was learning, it was so stiff because nobody would admit that it was not real. And so he had this horrible, as I think about it now, I think about it fondly, but he had this amazing headlock, and he would just put you in a headlock, and you really felt like you were dizzy afterwards because it was just such a stiff thing. So, it was such a different time that he was a character, And of course, as most people did, I came to really appreciate what he did for me. But ultimately, yeah, tons of ribs, tons, and backstage was that as well. So, that definitely, I agree.
There's a couple of comments in there from one Mario Mancini that you might get up, Jack, from the top there. He's watching you. Mario Mancini of the podcast on YouTube and of the Mario Mancini show here on GP Productions.
Yeah, I know. He just wrote stiff right to my left shoulder. And it's funny because he did it a lot longer than I did. And when we met up just recently, and I say just recently, I think it was around 10 freaking years ago, we were in the ring just messing around, taking a picture. And we locked up, and I felt so bad because he's like, we locked up, and I was still locking up stiff because that's how I remember doing it. But he has advanced like crazy, far, and done it a hell of a lot longer than I did. And we, and so he was like, oof, just, it was a very, I just, remember that, yeah, I was very stiff, and I still, worked stiff, even, at the end.
This one's interesting. There might be a little heat here. I'm just going to pull this one up. He absolutely refused to let you use his bedroom at a very crucial time. What's that about?
Well, Mario was young when I was the first time I met Mario. I was just learning how to. I was with Mr. Fuji, I believe, and we were in the ring early one day. Again, the rings would get set up. I think it was in New Haven, and the rings would get set up early, and I would go in and learn from these like luminaries, whether it was Rocky Johnson, Salvatore Colombo. I went. I was going to meet with Bruno, but that never happened in Pennsylvania, and which would have been an amazing thrill. Although Mario doesn't like Bruno. No, I'm joking. That's his favorite guy. Mario was young. He was still in high school when I met him. He was 17, and I remember seeing him in the audience there, and we met, and so we met and we became very, very good friends from the start, and I got an apartment in West Haven, Connecticut. There we go. Kurt Hennig. That was the day that Kurt Hennig was drop kicking me, and I didn't remember that was the day. But I got an apartment in Connecticut that was like a home for wayward wrestlers, and guys who were learning at the time would come in. They would spend a couple of days and learn at Passarella's Quest, and stay with me in just like in my outside room. And Mario, I think, was and I'm gonna leave that story for Mario because it's somewhat sensitive. But it was 40 years ago, so it's I guess some of the sensitivity goes away with time. But he was, I think he was in need of a bedroom. Let's put it that way. And I refused that initially, but I caved at some point. A story that I'm glad. I'm very sure that he's very happy that I allowed him to do that.
There you go.
That's straight and honest. And if anyone is wondering why he's not on screen, it's because Mario says that Mondays and Tuesdays are not good for him. That's why he's not here today. Because he does hard wrestling
he's a
Monday
star.
and Tuesday.
I take what I can get. He's a star,
Yeah, he's obviously slacking on this Monday in question, but it's great to have the guy Mario Mancini moderating the chat tonight, so he's still involved.
Yeah,
he's our admin. He says class starts in 10 minutes.
Well, I'm sure that he'll remind me of many other stories if we ever speak together on it.
So when you first broke in and started actually wrestling in front of crowds, etc., what was that? What did that entail? I take it was in the Northeast area prior to getting your work with the WWF, which we'll of course talk about.
Well, essentially, my work almost initially from the start was with the WWF. We did, because at the time Tony Altamore was very much involved in the wrestling business. He was management behind the scenes at the WWF and the WWF. And he was wrestling. He was a tag team with Captain Lou. And so he was WWF all the way. So I learned when I apprenticed all these different guys. It was, it was an experience. And then ultimately, when I went to the school, he had these, somewhat like Mario does. The talent that comes from your school, you put on these shows, and that's where I got whatever amount of experience prior to the TV tapings, which was not a heck of a lot. It was mostly school, a couple of matches, and I think Mario would back me up on this. A couple of matches, and then you're sitting in TV. My first match ever was with the Samoans and Rene Goulet. And that was like, I was green as, as green could be, and it was very, it was a very harrowing thing. I thought Mario, I think either Mario and I, or a guy named AJ Petrucci, and we came up with my ring name, Robbie Parliment, on a the trip to the first match, and that was again with the Samoans. Mario makes fun of me because when I first started using the name, I told Gorilla Monsoon, who was managing, and I gave him the name, and he said, okay. We started putting together the matches, and it was me and I think it was Kamala another day, and he calls it. He says Robbie across the room, and I had no idea who he was talking about because that was not my name. And he's Robbie, and Mario. I think it had to be Mario. And Mario gives me the elbow and says, "Hey, that's you." And ultimately, I remember that I was Robbie. So on my way to my first match, we came up with the name. And again, that was the Samoans. I was the recipient of like two of everything. I was a double headbutt, double clothesline, and they had to because I was somewhat bigger than them, and so they just kind of blasted me with everything they had. But I was a professional wrestler, and I couldn't be happier.
He's putting you over here. He said one of the casualties of wrestling, Seth 6'6", enormous.
Yeah, it was. I moved on for wrestling, and it was and I think Mario and I are friends forever, and I would do anything for him. When I stopped wrestling, I went into other things, and it happens that I was able to help him.
There's Big Dick in the conversation as well. He's watching you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Were you ever in a situation where, I know you're kind of thrown in at the deep end as you're saying about your career, but did you ever kind of look around you and be like, how did I get here so fast? And the second question is, were you ever starstruck by anyone? Yeah,
frankly, I was, and it's crazy to say this, but SD Jones, Special Delivery Jones, was like, when I met him that first day, it was crazy. And the idea that I was I had a stereo store in Brooklyn, and and essentially I slapped it together. And when I went to that match, I met S.T. Jones and Moolah, and like here these people who I had watched when I was a kid, totally, I was starstruck. And when I went to when I was maybe 13 or so, we went to a show, and what's his name, the Chief walked by, Chief Jay Strongbow, and he walked by, and I remember one of his feathers touched my hand. I was 13, and it was the most amazing thing. And then next thing you know, I'm 18 or 19. I'm sitting about to get my ass kicked. Sorry for the language, but I'm about to get my ass kicked. Oh, good, good. I'm talking to, Chief Jay Strongbow. That was one of the most amazing things. But yeah, I mean, it was like 18 or 19. All of a sudden, I used to be the kid who would stand in front of the class and give a presentation in high school, and my throat would be, like that kind of guy. And I was and then all of a sudden, I'm sitting here in tights in front of, 1,000 people, 2,000 people. My shows are being broadcast around the country and around the world in some cases. So it was just a really big, thing. And, like having people come to me and say, oh, I saw you, people from all around my life, and having that happen was, it was surreal, and all of a sudden, you're 18 or 19, and you're doing this stuff and working with Fuji was like, I couldn't believe I was sitting there again, as painful as the headlock was. I always felt very, very lucky to be there getting my ears, rung, and my, that kind of thing. So I'm very grateful, the way that happened, especially so young.
In terms of one of the matches that is available on YouTube, up here in the London Gardens in London, Ontario, Canada, you faced the great Dr. D, David Schultz. I wanted to ask you about how that match was, and part two of that question being, given the fact that the controversy that basically ended his career unjustly with Mr. Stoss, who later admitted to be lying. What were your thoughts on that whole situation when you heard that initially?
Well, there's actually one thing that happened prior to that was way bigger in my mind. He had a match with a young guy who was just coming into the business, wherein he broke his nose in two places, and that was Mario. He had just Dr. D had just had a match with him, and I remember going to see Mario. His nose is like, one part's here, one part's here, and as by the way, made him even more beautiful today. When I went to see Mario in the hospital, and then the next thing you know, they're telling me, "Oh, hey, you're going with Dr. D." I was like, "What am I going to have to do here?" And I wish I could say that I thought to myself, "Am I just going to have to lay him out and walk away?" No, I was just trying to think, how am I going to survive without messing up my career? And ultimately, going into the ring with him, I just, he was really a gruff guy. And the only thing he said to me was, "You got to sell what I'm doing, or else it's just going to get real bad." I remember that. I remember that to this day, because I was like, if he wants to sell, I'll sell. You know what I mean? I'm like, what am I going to do? This is a guy who, while quite frankly, for many years, and maybe even today, I think he's a scumbag. But you know, I by the same token, you know, he was a scumbag who had was with in the top parts of the WWF. So you're always, it's like a balancing, right? You know, what am I going to do? You know, so I just played it safe and went to and you know, like really sold it, and I came out okay. He came out okay. It was not a very good match, but early on they're not very good matches because they're trying to suss you out and make sure that you're, you know, what you say you are, and you're not going to hurt them. So I think, you know, for me, the biggest thing was like when you gave me two parts, Jack, you know, you said, you know, the one thing with the other guy and the one, and the fact that, you know, the Stossel thing, I think that happened afterwards. Because I don't
85, yeah.
But for me, the big thing was Mario. You know, the Mario getting his nose busted up was really, that was most top of mind.
Mario has admitted before that on his first day when he walked in there, he was surprised that it was all a work. How much did you know before you went in? Because obviously wrestling was a secret kind of business in the 80s. And what did you know before you go in? And what were you most surprised when you first started it?
I would say, first of all, I don't know that I was that positive it was a work. I was pretty sure that it was. But, you know, simply because at the time I was like, I don't know, maybe 350, 6'6", 350. I had, you know, played football. I was, you know, and I think I could have done a lot better than I did if it wasn't a work. But I was fairly well, you know, well aware that it was entirely possible that it was a work. Let's put it that way. I don't really know that we thought it was because everybody was so, it was like, you know, you just get your butt kicked. You know, that was kind of what you did. And, you know, and you go in and, you know, but, you know, when you're sitting there and they're telling you, you know, I think I enjoy hearing Mario talk about it, but like when he talks about, you know, how they said, you know, what am I going to do? And he says, well, you're just going to go home. And I forget how he puts it, but, you know, I'm going to beat you up and then you're just going to go home. And, you know, that's kind of what I said with the Samoans my first day. You know, I'm with them and, you know, we're talking about the match a little bit. And I said, well, what can I do to show to show that I'm, you know, that I could do this? Could I pick you up for, you know, a slam? What could I do? And, you know, ultimately, I just, you know, they said nothing. You could do nothing. And that was it. And I was like, I was so bummed because here I was. And then I had my aunt who was in she was in an old age home, calling me, seeing if I was okay. You know, it felt so horrible. And I had, you know, another friend saying, you know, his father was like, oh, what kind of wrestler is he? You know, but it's part of the game. You know, it was part of the game at that time. And I think it still is that you just get your butt kicked. You know, just what you do. You know, and so it was surprising. But there was the fact that there was no element of that, and we were never told about it, was even more surprising. You know, I think today, when you look at how these schools operate, I think it's very obvious that they know that, and I think it prepares you better because you have to know that this, you know, what we learned was when I remember I took judo for a lot of years before I came to wrestling, and my fall when I was thrown was always roll. You know, you roll into it, and I had to learn that I needed to stop with the motions and at the same time make a loud noise. And that was something that was it was very different to me. But, you know, I suppose that should have cued me in a little. But the way I think it was described was it's just more drama. You know, it's like it's more drama and more noise to show. You know, it's just more dramatic, but nobody said it wasn't real.
On that card that you wrestled Schultz on TV, apparently, according to the historical record, Andre the Giant was also on that show, and I guess he main evented against one of the Vachons. Just wondering if you had the opportunity to interact with him on that particular show or any time subsequently.
Yeah, I did. Not on that show, and I think I don't recall who it was, but I was in the dressing room on one of those times. But remind me about Andre, because I did have some interactions with him. But I was in the show and I was getting ready to go in, and I had my tights on and I was lacing my boots, and I hear from behind me this big dramatic phew, and all of a sudden I got hit with water, and I was so keyed up and thinking about what I was doing, I didn't react at all, and I must have looked like a mental case, because I didn't jump up, I didn't do anything. I just sat there, and I don't remember who it was, but it was someone really, really big. But I don't think it was Andre. But that was like one of the ribs. And then another one was Freddie Blassie. I was putting my boots on, and he came over with a stick and came up between your legs, and that was one of the big things that he did. I might screw this up, but one of the best jokes, and I still use it today every once in a while. He says, Freddie Blassie said, I think it was, I had dreams of teepees and wigwams, and I went to the psychologist and told him, and he said, I know what the problem is, you're too tense. And that was a Freddie Blassie joke. And again, these were not the greatest of jokes, but I thought they were fantastic. Why? Because Freddie Blassie told me. Because, and was I happy with having my nuts hit with a stick? No. But it was Freddie Blassie. It was like, I'll take that any day. But Andre, I was in a match with Kamala. And when I was in the match with Kamala, at that time, there was this big play going on, bringing who's the real giant, and it was the Ugandan giant versus Andre the Giant, and it was all moving up to a big climax with Andre and him. So I went in, and so green. It was my third match, I think, and we agree how we're going to finish it, and we move on. So I go in, and he throws me down somehow. I forget how it was, but I forgot that he does his splashes belly to back. Like, his splashes were, I guess, a special thing for him, and it was always belly to back. And I set up for the belly to belly, and so he had to come down and move me, and it's on. You see it on TV, on YouTube, and he's got to like roll me over, bring me around. I was so green to the cameras, and it was not fun. So when he gave me that first splash, he kind of gave me that first splash. And I remember, if you remember what he looked like, he's passed away now, but I mean, he was a big belly, and I remember seeing a big flash of light, and it really wasn't good. But he gave me like 3 or 4 of them, and then all of a sudden Andre came out of the back and scared him away. And I'll always remember that Andre, I played it because I was really thinking about how to play it, and I jumped out of the ring, and I even phony let my legs give way a little, you know what I mean? So I was totally playing it up, and Andre helped me out, and I remember it was like hugging a Volkswagen. It was like this crazy, thing where, I was supposed to be, by the way, when we were in the ring, stepping back for a moment, when we were in the ring, I was getting up and Andre was with me, but at the time he wasn't in good shape. And I was making it look like he was helping me up when in fact I was pushing him up and trying to help as best I could. So that was my interaction. He walked me backstage. He said, "Good job, kid." And that was it. I had another interaction with him, but it was before this. We went to, I think it's Tuesday Night Titans was the name. I just remember them. I was looking at that, and Andre was on Tuesday Night Titans. It was a fairly famous thing where he put his boot on the top, right, and he put his boot on the Vince McMahon's ear, his boot ear, and I think I was there with AJ Petrucci, but we had gone. My trainer Tony Altimore, 8x10. My Tony Altimore says to me, he says, "Yeah, come to Baltimore. We're going to go to Baltimore," and that's where Tuesday Night Titans was made. And I get into this, Lincoln, and I think it might even have been Tony's Cadillac. Tony's favorite was having an Eldorado, a convertible Eldorado, but I think it was a Lincoln. And there's Lord Alfred Hayes in the front seat. And so it's Lord Alfred Hayes and Tony, and we go to this taping. And there's about 10 of us backstage. I'm sitting here. Andre is sitting behind me to the left of me, chugging these it's like you, Marcia, have a can in your hand. He's got a bottle of wine that looks almost the same size as that can in your hand. And he's going and he's drinking. And we were instructed to say clap and boo at the same time because there wasn't a lot of people there. So to make it look like there were at least twice the people. But that was like an amazing, to be sitting there with Andre, just absolutely amazing. And I said to myself, how is this even possible? Morris, when we talked the other day, and I was like thinking at 18 and 19 to be doing that, I was like such a baby face, and so naive. Like Mario said, it was a great experience, really great.
But here we are now, and the stories are coming back as we talk, which is cool.
I know, and it's like I'm sitting here and I'm going, I've been away for this for literally 30 years. I've moved on. I have I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer for 30 years. No, 25 years. But I started this journey to being a lawyer 30 years ago. And so it's like my head's not in it. My head is totally a different place. And now that we're talking, that's why I was looking forward to this, because I haven't thought about this stuff in years, and all these stories are coming back. So I'm very, very happy to talk.
Yeah. And so are we. That they're very positive stories and nice stories to hear. On the flip side of it, did you ever have any negative experiences there, or was there people there that weren't very welcoming?
Well, yeah, I mean, getting to know Mario was a negative experience. No, I'm totally joking. That was a great experience. Honestly, it was a fairly good thing, and we were very, it was a very welcoming, I'm Jewish, and when all of the guys were getting ready for this big Kuwait trip, I couldn't go. So was that, was I happy about that? No. But ultimately, I never heard one single word about Jewish versus Catholic versus anything. You see, Jack, you're the reason why Mario has wrestling on the brain.
That's because he is going to have his final match ever on June 29th for Great North Wrestling in Napanee, Ontario, and everyone is talking about it.
And I absolutely believe that that's going to be his final match. There will never be another, and it'll be an interesting day.
I got a sneaky suspicion he might get a victory. I don't know. Place your bets.
Mario is horrible. Nice.
That's Mario's promoter.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Mario's moneymaker.
I think all of us who are in Team Mario, who are clearly Team Mario, would have equally horrible thing to say about him if asked.
A fan.
Did you know that he's?
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Jack. I'm just going to fill Robbie in that he is now the singing wrestler on TikTok as well, just for you, where he sings in his car.
Wow. I guess I'm going to have to add that to my list of things to do and catch Mario singing. Mario, I guess if we have to say one thing about Mario that would be negative, and that would be, and I'm gonna, what is it? The word shoot. I'm gonna show it. His driving skills were not the greatest, and I'm just gonna say it because I'm way over here in Florida, and I'm sorry to hear he just resigned from Scott Wilder Promotions. But I'll always remember about Mario, and this was, again, I think he might have gotten better at this over the years, but at that time, he would go into a curve. You know how you go into a curve and you make one adjustment to the steering wheel and you kind of flow through the curve? Well, at the time, Mario, he would just go like this. And I thought I was going to die every time not because we were in an accident, it was because I was getting nauseous, and he wasn't the greatest driver. So like he would drive, we would all take turns driving. Like we would see everyone of us. And, so even 30, 40 years later, he still is known for his prowess. But it's like we would all drive, because we were in the second crew. We weren't the guys getting the planes. We were the guys just getting a rental car. I remember they'd rent a car and they would throw 4 of us in it and we would drive. So me, Mario, a guy named Dave Barbie, who was around back then, AJ Petrucci, we all hop in the car and we would drive and take turn driving. So Mario driving, I would gladly take his spot, even though it meant double driving. But I mean, I think that, the idea that we spend so much time ribbing each other, it just shows you how close. And I think the big thing was going through what we went through was it has a propensity to make you very close. And it was great fun.
Well, you've taken his spot tonight on the Mario Mancini show.
There we go. Well, I take what I can get.
Fan wanted to know if you ever came across the recently announced Hall of Fame inductee Paul Heyman when he was just a photographer working for Titan Sports.
No, and it's funny. Wow, I can't believe you said Titan Sports. That was like, I regret cashing my first check from them because Titan Sports was WWF, and no, I don't recall Paul Heyman. And it could mean a faulty memory, or it could mean that I just didn't interact with him. But I had one of the guys, after I'd started wrestling, a guy named Ed Cohen was around at that point. And we happened to share the same last name. Not Parliment, by the way, but, and so Ed, and somehow I just got a little friendly with Ed, and we, hung out a couple of times, and he knew my dad. But, ultimately, the reason I'm saying this is because I had met a bunch of these guys, and Ed Cohen, and I had gone into the WWF Tower a number of times, and I met a lot of people while I was there. So I could have, I just don't recall.
Fair enough. You mentioned a couple of times that you had interactions with various folks, and of course Vince Jr. being the host of Tuesday Night Titans. Just wondering if you had any interactions with Mr. McMahon.
Funny enough, I had very few interactions. I came in there and he gave me a list of matches that I was going to be going on and going to. Generally, they were stretched out through New England, and we, and a couple other times. But interestingly, the one where I had, or it was really funny, was Vince's son was graduating from the school that I graduated law school from at the same exact time. And friends who had known that I was a wrestler came to me and said, Vince is here, Vince is here, Vince is here. But that was, honestly, that was just a funny coincidence. I didn't see him then. But I didn't have a heck of a lot to do with Vince. I've heard good and bad things about him, but I can't contribute to any of them. Just because I've had so few conversations with him. Sure. But at the time, I forget the guy's name. He was in management from New Zealand. You can recall it. Tony Gurria. Yeah, he was a great guy. Met him a number of times. Of course, the Chief was a great guy. I know he had a very, very central part in Mario's life. But I ran away fairly quickly. I did it for a number of years. And then when I saw that I felt like I wasn't getting where I wanted to get, I moved on. And also it was kind of a gradual leaving. My mom got sick and I went home to help my dad, and I got out of shape, and just, it was more gradual. But I never thought it was going to end so soon, but ultimately it just became too tough to get back in. I was there when Rita Ref was there. Really nice. I count her as a friend today. She did a good job with Tony and the rest of them, learning how to be, blazing trails as a woman referee. I wish I remember a lot more about it, but she was just really good.
Yeah. And thanks to Mario, we are the only interview on this channel that she's done in 30 years since she was on TV for reasons we don't need to go into. But she came back to the business a few weeks back, and that's nice to see. She can put everything behind her. And
yeah, I saw that. I was very, very gratified to see that. And I think it's a testament to the trust that she has in Mario. And I mean, frankly, Mario was the one who told me about you guys and about the thing. And I think it's the testament to Mario and to the fact that, we trust him so very much. And then looking at some of your work through the years, you can tell, that it's not it's cheap heat, not cheap shot, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's an open book for people to go kind of whatever way they want. We won't push any narratives or anything like that. So I think that's why people enjoy it.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the whole Irish connection for me was almost too much to bear. The fact that I spent so much time where you are.
Yeah, Jack. So it's your wife's family, isn't it?
Yes.
Live 10 kilometers from my house.
Wow.
And we were married. We were married right near him in Carlow. We got married in this little town called Ballinacil, which we in a church in Ballinacil. And then we drove to Carlow, and we spent so much time where he's from in Kilkenny that it just the amount of time I spent so close. It just was interesting, and I've always had a fondness for the people I've met over there.
You're going to have to come back over then.
I'll be there. We're it's been a little too long. My wife's brother died on Everest about 10 years ago. I think it was 10 years ago. It was a big thing over in Ireland, and you might have even heard about it. But John, what's that?
It does seem to ring a bell.
Yeah, John died on Everest, and she had a pub, and her family had a pub, and at that time we were coming over there every year. But I think most of the people are gone now, so we don't come over as much. But when we do, we're in Ballinacil, Kilkenny, and of course Dublin, and that kind of thing. But yeah, we'll be back.
Wanted to ask you about during the tenure that you were around the WWF, working for them, etc. That was kind of the embryonic stages of Hulkamania. Backlund had just dropped the belt to the Sheik. Hogan beat him, and then Hulkamania was starting in '84 onwards. Do you remember any interactions with Hulk, or was there a sense that this was going to be a really big deal for the business picking up?
Yeah, we were kind of bummed, frankly. I remember sitting with, I think it was Mario, and Mario will tell you for sure, but it was either one of us from Passarella Quest school. We were sitting in this room when all of a sudden this busload of people comes in, and they're all like Hulk Hogan, all these other guys who came in from the other, when Vince went on his talent quest, and I went from being like the third tallest person in the WWF to being like the eighth, because they brought all this amazing talent, including Hogan and the rest of them. So we were kind of bummed about it, because it seemed like, and this was just before we got our break, just before we started working. And, it was just, if we had been there a year earlier, I think we would have gotten a lot more play, and maybe even, a couple of us who were better a push. But ultimately, these guys walked in. One guy was, I forget his name, and he wore a mask, and he would do this thing where he was walking on the ropes. And I don't know if that helps you any, but
Don Jardine?
No, he was
Destroyer?
He was like, I don't know, I want to say the Crippler, but it wasn't. That wasn't his name. But he went behind a mask, and maybe Don Jardine might be his name, but he was like he was one of these guys who had a very defined persona, even with the mask.
Masked Superstar?
No.
Not Bill Eadie.
No, it wasn't. At one point, I almost had the Masked Superstar had an issue, and I was we were gonna do some work together. And by the way, I think Mario piped in at one point, just as an aside. At the time, I had this big goofy head of hair, and now I don't. There was some thought that I should have been tag teaming with another person who had a totally bald head, but we just never got around to it. But getting back to Hogan, it was the day that those guys arrived was a big deal for us, because we felt like we got moved further down the line. And maybe even Mario would disagree. I don't know, but I felt that way. We were in a very good spot in terms of being at Passarella's Quest for our school, and Hogan showed up there a couple of times at least, and the WWF did some tapings there, with Hillbilly Jim and Hogan, and we had I got to tell you, one of the biggest thrills that I had was Ivan Putski came into the gym, and he was lifting there, and I was next to him on an incline bench, and I was like so thrilled I was lifting the same weight that he was. But Hogan was, and besides that, that was about it.
You kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but what was the moment you realized that this wasn't for you and you were going to pursue other interests outside of wrestling? Was there a moment that kind of defined that?
I think for me, my back was really bad. It became worse and worse. And ultimately, I knew that I had to find a career that was going to be 40 years, or 5 really, really good years. But no, and I didn't see that happening with the WWF. So once I got that through my thick skull, probably 2 or 3 years after I should have, I decided that I was going to move on. But as I said, my mom got sick, and my dad was blind. My dad had been blind for 20 years prior, and they needed help. And I went home to do that. And once I got home, I think it was easy to stay home. Again, I was like 23 at that time. And B, I got out of shape, and getting back in shape was a little tough. And then I said, let me see what else I should do. And I went through a couple of things, and ultimately in the 90s, I went and got out of law school and did that.
Well, our time has really flown by here. Some tremendous stories, but before we wrap this one up, wanted to get your opinion on a question that we on this channel have had the pleasure of interviewing many greats from the 80s, 90s, your era, where enhancement talents were a central portion of the television product and the business, and they played such an important role in building interest, etc. When the live show was a major income driver, ticket sales. So given all of that, do you feel that it's overdue that there be some form of recognition for the Carpenters, in, as we like to call them, star makers, whatever you want to call them, in a Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame?
I'm not sure. I guess I always looked at enhancement and talent, and thank you for using that term. There are less friendly terms for it, but I always thought that it was sort of like capitalism, and I know this is kind of a follow. You put your name in the hat, and you worked as a journeyman with the hope that at some point you get a push. And that was the give and take. You'd get your butt kicked. You would get your butt kicked. You put the work in, and it was like winning the lottery, right? Hulk Hogan is a lottery, and when and I don't mean to denigrate what he did in the slightest. Not that I could, but I don't mean to denigrate that at all, because it's such a rare person who wins the lottery, and who works towards it. So when I put my name in as I thought I was getting my butt kicked. I was coming home sore every time for very little money. We were getting paid $40 a day for our TV shots. And when I was coming back and I was getting that, all I was asking for was a chance to get a push at some point. So do I think that there should be some? There are some people who have did so much of that there should be a spot for them in all of these places to get some recognition, because we did a lot of the work, and we got we paid with our bodies, we paid with our time, and so when I guess it's a great question. I think that the system itself was fair, because you were sitting there and you were hoping for that shot. and that's all I wanted, and that's what I got. And you know, would it be fair for someone to be, lauded in a Hall of Fame? Absolutely. I think that that the skill it took to put someone over well is, and believe me, I ain't talking about myself. I'm talking about the Marios. I'm talking about the AJs. I'm talking about all those other guys who did it for a long time and who really, really excel. So I think it's a good. It would be a good thing to show some gratitude, and I think that's a really good thing. And I think to some extent, the New England group has really gone a long way to showing that gratitude.
One final one from me then. Have you ever done a convention?
No, I've been so far away, honestly.
There we go. We need to get that booked.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go to one just to hang with just to hang with Mario and the guys and you guys. Do you guys go to conventions?
Not really.
I haven't in a while, but this year going to definitely be making a few.
The opportunity to hang with Mario, because I don't think I laugh as much as when I'm with Mario. To go hang with Mario and Roma and Petrucci and all these guys would be amazing.
There we go.
Well, Seth, there you go. Scott Wilder says, send him my number, which we definitely shall.
I got my shot.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, I want to, on behalf of the fans and ourselves, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. Great.